Hey everyone, welcome to our channel. This is Frostbitten Drifter, but you can call me Oz or Frostbitten or Frosty Oz. It's Oz, like Ozzy Osbourne, not like Frosty Ass. Don't. You can call me that, I guess, too. Anyway, I'm here today to talk a little bit about a card game that I've just gotten into called Exodus, the trading card game, Exodus TCG. What I'm here to talk about today is staples in the Exodus card game. A staple is essentially a card that you'd play in every deck regardless of what type of deck you're playing for the most part. You know, they're meta dependent. They're also just the best cards in general. They haven't been power creeped yet, in other words. So yeah, there's staples in every card game. And I'm a player of Yu-Gi-Oh! Yu-Gi-Oh! Is kind of my TCG, but I'm really getting into Exodus so far. So I thought I'd explain what I've learned in the short time I've been playing this game or getting into this game, and explain why these are staples for some people who might not understand. Especially if this is your first TCG, you might not understand card economics or advantage. Anywho, let's start with Unsummon. Unsummon was released in Birth of Creation, which is the first set. It's 2 starter decks. That's the whole set. So if you buy 1 of each starter deck, you've got 1 of every card of the set. Which is kind of cool, kind of different. Its effect is pay 1 energy, select 1 creature on the field, return to its owner's hand. All energy attached to that creature is discarded. Now it's a symmetry, meaning that you can disrupt things. It is the equivalent of like a magic's instant. It's a hand trap if you want to talk in Yu-Gi-Oh! Language. It's used to kind of switch advantage onto your side. So basically, if your opponent summons a creature under a pile of 2 or even 3 energy, and you play this, that creature that you unsummoned goes back to their hand, and then they lose those 2 or 3 energy, and that's just permanent. That doesn't go back to their hand. So it's basically a way to kind of stun them for a turn and allow you to gain a better footing next turn. Its counterpart is reversion. It's a very similar effect. You select 1 creature on the field, return to its owner's hand. All energies attached to that creature stay on the field, though. So essentially, if they summon a creature over a pile of 2, that just goes back to their hand. Now they have a blank pile of 2, which they can do whatever they want with. So this is inherently not as good, you would say, but it has places. In one sense, it's your 3rd and 4th copy of Unsummon. You can't play more than 2 copies, so you can just max out. It's a really easy way to clear out your opponent's field if you're trying to go for like a push for a game, because you really don't care if they have energies on their field if you're just going to attack. It also, reversion can be comboed with, I don't remember her name. It's Alana and then the Blades chick, the Lazarus or something like that. She can attack multiple times, so you play Alana, reversion it. You have you have a blank pile of 4 energy, and you can summon her on top of that, and then if it's a clear field, you can go for 7 damage, which is cool. So reversion has its place in the meta, but I wouldn't call this a staple. It's more of a semi-staple, depending on the matchup and the deck you play. Another card from Birth of Creation, which also deals with card economics and advantage, is Vortex. This card is crazy. So you have to pay an energy. Both you and your opponent discard your entire hand, including any unplayed energies, then draw 3 cards from your main deck. So, for someone who might not be very experienced with TCGs, this might seem as like a fair card. It's borderline bad. It's like, okay, if you play this turn 1, you both discard 6 cards, including your energies, and then draw 3 cards. Like, what? I don't understand how that's good, right? But the whole idea is you play this on your opponent's first turn. So if you're going first, you set up your board. You use all your energies you can. You make 3 piles of 1, whatever you want to do, and then summon any creatures that you don't want to discard. Then after that, you go to your opponent's turn. Then you can immediately vortex them. They have to discard their whole hand and then draw 3 cards, but they don't have any energy, so they cannot summon any creatures that turn. You can also do this any other turn. Any other turn except for the very first turn of the game would be the most ideal, because every turn you draw 3 energies and 3 cards from your main deck. So as soon as they enter the draw phase and they draw, then you have a retaliation essentially. You vortex them, after they draw, before they go into their energy phase. And it kind of just stuns them for a turn. It's insane, honestly. I think they know, they say they know what they're doing when they create the game, and so this must have been intentional, but that just seems like too good almost. But I digress. I haven't really played the game a whole lot. This is just my first impressions of it. So another card that is considered staple by most people, Leech. This might be falling out of favor of the few deck lists I've seen that are kind of competitive. Leech isn't always played. It might be considered a semi-staple. But I think it's really good. It's at least a budget option. So what you can do is essentially you choose one energy from a creature or pile on your opponent's side of the field, then have them discard that energy. Then you take an energy out of your energy deck and put it on a creature or pile on your side of the field. Play this, it pays for itself. So Leech isn't like a neg or anything, because you leech and then you get an energy. So you keep a card on the field, and the opponent has to lose an energy. It's also symmetry, of course. So what that means is you can disrupt. If your opponent makes a pile of 1 and then goes in their creature phase and summons a creature, you can leech it, meaning that it takes its last energy and it dies before it can activate any kind of effect. That's pretty good. You can also push for OTKs with this, essentially giving you an extra energy for the turn. So the next symmetry is a card called Crystal Cove. This was formerly from the latest set. The new set's coming out very shortly. Crystal Forge is when this came out last year. Symmetry, obviously. Pay 1 energy. You select 1 symmetry and play other than this card and freeze it. It remains frozen until the end of your opponent's next turn. What this is good at, this is basically a negate. In Yu-Gi-Oh language, it's kind of like an Ash Blossom. The best way to use Crystal Cove as like a kind of a counter is when you get Vortex. Say your opponent plays Vortex and they've already kind of established a board and it's your turn, it's the beginning of your turn, then you can just immediately Crystal Cove it. It gets put face down, frozen. It does not resolve. Then during your opponent's end phase, it'll resolve. This allows you to kind of get a better deal out of Vortex and not have to dump all your unplayed energies or whatnot. So Crystal Cove is essentially a way to make unfair cards more in your favor. It can also disrupt cards that are trying to disrupt you, such as Unsummon. If you're trying to go in for a game, you can Crystal Cove and Unsummon, and then continue with your plays. Great in Shard Folk because, you know, it's also a frozen card. That's why it came out in Crystal Forge. So yeah, there's a lot of versatility with Crystal Cove. I think this is definitely still a staple. Then the final card that I would consider by far a staple is the newest card, Glimpse of the Sanctuary, sorry. It's a promo. Each player may have a blank pile on their field, gain 1 energy. Then you may draw 1 card out of your main deck. So obviously going first, you go into your energy phase, you play whatever piles of energy you want to play, but you have a blank pile of energy. Then you can play this card. You can essentially gain an energy onto that, and then draw a card. So this is a +1 essentially. It's really good. And it's really easy to kind of keep your opponent from gaining any advantage off this as well, especially on your first turn. Granted, if they have something like an Invoke or any other kind of card that gives them on-field presence with energy piles, they will gain the energy. But I think it's worth taking the chances, and you still get the draw out of your main deck. Both players don't draw, just you. So that's kind of the crazy part about it. I think it's really cool. I can't wait to get my hands on some of these because I think it's a really good card. Also, the art's amazing, so that's cool. I'd like to quickly go over some other cards that I think have kind of fallen a little out of favor, or maybe are matchup dependent, or deck dependent, or may just be budget options, because you can't fit so many staples in a 20 card deck. You know, you can only make room for certain ones. The first one I want to talk about is back in Birth of Creation is Chains. This was definitely a staple for a while, and it is still played a lot. It's just I don't consider it a staple. So basically, when this card is played, it remains on the field until its effect has occurred. If this card is played on your turn, your opponent can attack during their next turn. If it's played on your opponent's turn, they can attack during that turn. Pretty self-explanatory. It just stops your opponent from ramming into your guys for a turn. And you can kind of play it at any time. So if they vortex you or make you discard cards, you can play it as a onto the stack, and then it'll still be there to protect you. So it's very good. It's a very good card. The game's already a very fast game, so this kind of helps like slow burn decks. But if you're playing a very aggro deck, which a lot of decks are, or a very combo deck where you just don't have a lot of room, Chains is probably going to be cut. It's usually played as like a 1 anyway. So there's pros and cons to Chains. Reversion is another card I've already talked about. It has combos. It's a combo card with the Alana Blades deck. But outside of that, it's not played heavily. I guess if you're playing a very heavy symmetry deck, this is a really good card. But you'd rather just play Unsummon. Another card from Birth of Creation is Cataclysm. I wouldn't consider this a staple, but it's a very good card. It's a very budget-friendly card. So it's a decent substitute. It's half of Leech. Select 1 energy from your creature or pile, from a creature or pile on your opponent's side of the field, and have them discard that energy. Leech, of course, you get to take an energy out of your energy pile and put it on your side of the field. So Cataclysm is essentially the reversion of Unsummon, if that makes sense. Let's go to Invoke. I've kind of mentioned this a little bit. Take 1 energy from your energy deck and start a new pile. It's a symmetry, of course, so you can disrupt things. You have to start a new pile, meaning you can't add onto a pile, or onto a creature, which is too bad. It isn't super worth it. It's not a bad card at all. It's just there's other cards to play other than this, and there's not a lot of room. So that's kind of why Invoke isn't super played. And then the last card I want to talk about is also from Crystal Forge, similar to Crystal Cove, and it is Drifter's Dueling. Now this is even featured, there's a little blurb featured onto the second magazine released by Exodus. And they even talk about this, and I've seen some other YouTubers talk about this. And it's a pretty cool card, but I don't think it's considered like a staple yet. Essentially, you look at your opponent's hand, select one card from it, and put it on top of their deck. There's no energy cost there, so that's huge. Also, it's a symmetry, so obviously you can disrupt. And lastly, if you're trying to go really aggressive, you can look at your opponent's hand, which, if you play Yu-Gi-Oh, that is like a huge effect. I think every game, if you look at your opponent's hand, that's just a huge effect by itself, because you know what to play around, you know what they're gonna do next turn. It's really crazy. So you get to look at your opponent's hand and then take a card out of that and put it on top of their deck, meaning that you can stack their deck slightly for next turn. When they draw 3 cards, one of them, you know what it's going to be. So if you're going like first, right, you can play this before you play anything else and hit like an unsummon, so you know your creature's going to be safe for the turn. And then if you're worried of something like a Vortex, you can play this during the end phase of your opponent's turn and snag out any kind of symmetry that you're scared of, such as like a Vortex or an unsummon. And then next turn, you've seen their hand, so you draw, you already know what they're going to play, if they're going to play anything, and you have taken away their biggest play stopper. So that's just a huge swing in tempo. So yeah, this is just a little video explaining some of the symmetries that you might see in people's decks. They've changed over the past couple years, the past couple sets. For the most part, there's a lot that are like these 3, these are still from the first set. But then there's, stuff like Crystal Cove, and then Glimpse is a promo. So yeah, and Drifter's Dueling even. So when the new set comes out in a few weeks, or a couple weeks, I don't know when the date is, there might be new symmetries. So yeah, if you're trying to get into the game and you don't know what kind of staples you want to add, I hope this video kind of helped, or at least explain to you why people are playing cards like such as Drifter's Dueling, or Vortex, or Unsummon, if this isn't clear to you. Hopefully this explains it. I look forward to making more videos explaining Exodus and kind of what I'm learning as I go along, because I'm a very new player as well. And hopefully, if you're watching, you can learn something too, and we can both grow together as drifters. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.